To the third day of PTG, the Cinder PTG, and there is a topic added by Brian. If people are interested in looking, like he has prepared an Etherpad with all the tests we are currently running. I'm not sure which CI it is based on, probably NetApp, but yeah, he has upstream and our downstream test, like a compilation of all the tests that we are running. So if anyone is interested, they can take a look. Brian won't be around today because he has to attend these sessions, so I guess he has just added those links for reference. And we can get started with the first topic, status update on the quota fix effort. So Gurka, that is by you, and whenever you feel like you can get started.
Yeah, thank you. I will try to help myself with some slides. So I'll see if I can make it happen. Just a second. Let's see what happens. Because BlueJeans and Chrome have not been friendly lately. Yep, I think just froze. Awesome. Okay, I'll try it. Yep, Chrome just died. So it's going to take me a couple seconds. Because the video right now it's in Firefox. I was trying to share it with Chrome.
Hope 2BlueJeans doesn't crash your system again.
Yeah, Chrome, yes. Yeah. Okay, let's see. I can share directly. I will not see anybody, but is there anything showing, not showing?
Yeah, I can see the presentation.
Awesome.
Yep.
Progress. Okay. So in the last PTG, I said that I was going to be working on fixing our quotas. We agreed to look into to work on the direction of counting things, and I wanted to give an update. For everybody that did not attend that one or are not familiar with the quotas, I'll just say that basically quotas are a pain point for almost every deployment. It's not the worst thing that can happen, but it's pretty bad. So in a scale of the Black Knight from Monty Python is I've had worse. And right now the system uses limits where you can limit by volume, gigabytes, and per volume type, things like that. So it counts the resources that are currently being used, the things that are reserved because they are ongoing operations, and then it compares them with any request that comes in. All these numbers, so the numbers of limit, in use, and reserve are stored in the database. And whenever an operation completes, it does a commit of the reservation that gets moved into the in-use table. If there is an error, it has to do a rollback. In general, this means that throughout all our code, we have a lot of places where we have to manually increment, rollback, and commit. And if we forget or if something happens, everything goes out of sync. The proposal, as I said, was to move this reservation accounting and to start counting whenever you request a new volume. You would say, okay, one more volume. Then let me count how many volumes I have, plus the one you want, and compare it with your current limits. And for this, we needed to, of course, we had to ensure, since we would be counting things in the database, that we have the necessary indexes set up there. That was the proposal. Of course, I implemented this, and we always have to think about performance. And I remember a long time ago when this was discussed, prior to the last PTG, that performance was always a concern. And they were saying it is not performant, it is not going fine. And Eric, at least I remember Eric and I disagreeing that that was not possible, that it should be fine. So I wanted to run some performance numbers and see how well it compares to the previous one. The first thing, another of the reasons, not only because there had been questions regarding the performance, but also because when I started working on the new driver, I noticed that the queries were not as simple as I originally thought. Because when you think about it, you say, okay, yep, you have a limit, you have a volume in the database with what we are currently using, you have another table with what is going on in your request. It should not be that complicated to query. But then you start seeing that, for example, for the limits, you have to check two different tables. One with the global defaults, and then you can think of it as an overlay, which are the per project limits. So just to get the limits, you have to check two. Then the limits you have per volume and per volume type, both for gigabytes and volumes. And the limits table store things by name, by the volume type name, which is unique. But the volumes store things by volume type ID. So you cannot just do a match directly between the two. You have to go through an intermediary table, which is the volume types table, to figure out what the volume type ID of volume name in the limits table tables is. Then we also have to take into account that snapshot gigabytes, depending on a Cinder configuration option, may also count towards your gigabyte limits, both the global and the per volume type ones. So things start getting a little bit, the query start becoming a little bit more complicated, that it just starts to have to access a bunch of different tables to do the operation. And then to realize that there are some operations that will require the reservations table. Not all, there are only a couple of them. But still, that means you also have to check that table for values, not counting, but to have a counter there, or at least a line for each operation, a row, sorry. So given that previously people thought, well, some people had done some tests and thought that performance was not sufficient, and me seeing that my queries were becoming more and more complex, I ran some tests and I looked at different things. First, I looked at just two operations: create volume and get the current usage. I restricted to the initial part, not the whole operation. So it's only the API section where you actually do the quota counting, the checks, and everything. These tests for both of these operations were done with a single request and multiple requests, then concurrent one. And I looked at how long it took to complete the whole thing and divided it by the number of requests, so I would get a per request average value, a total value. I would also look at the CPU consumption, because depending on how you do things, the CPU consumption shifted from mostly Cinder to now that we do a lot of things in the database, the distribution changes. I'm hearing some noises. I don't know if everybody's hearing them.
Yeah, so please everyone they mute their mics.
Yep, I think it's Fernando. Forgot to turn.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
But yeah, you probably can mute. No worries. So there is a shift depending on the implementation from where we're consuming CPU and how much we are consuming. So those were the numbers I looked at, but I'm going to simplify now what I present, because otherwise this would take forever and I'm already taking too long. First, with concurrently one concurrency to create a simple volume, the red value is the old system. The vertical axis, it's in milliseconds, so it took kind of 100 milliseconds. And in the X axis, we have the number of resources that were available in the system. Why? Because, of course, if for the old system that just checked single resource, it didn't add a single value in the database, it stays linear, because it doesn't matter how many of them I have. To check it, I just check one single or a couple of locations, but always the same number. Whereas when you're dynamically counting from the database, the more resources you have, the worse it gets, because it will increase. And that's what we can see in the blue line, that it starts by taking half the time for a request, only 50 milliseconds, for 10 volumes or something like that. But as we grow, and suddenly we start doing 5,000, 10,000, 15, 20, we see that it tends to reach the point where it takes as long as the old one. This is for a single request serially being done. But when we increase the concurrency 10, then we see that this changes greatly. Both of them reduce the average, because they, of course, concurrency. There are timings in different services, Python, the network, and the database. So the old system goes from 100 to 40 milliseconds on average per request, and the new system would go from 50 to less than 20. But we see that in 27,000 volumes in the system, now the new system is slower than the old one. This is not great if you have a very huge project with a lot of resources. The get usage is a lot worse, which makes sense, because for the old system, all it has to do is return a couple of rows, whereas in the new system, it actually has to count things. And it is worse for higher volumes that even the create volume, because for create, you don't request counts for everything. Whereas when you get the usage, you have to check it for volumes, snapshots, backups, everything. So it gets worse and worse considerably so. For concurrency 10, you can see if we change it, it basically halves, but it's for the new system, but it's still a lot worse than the old one. I'm not too worried about this one because I don't think that most clouds are constantly worried what they use about the usage, but it still is something to take into consideration. Brian was kind enough to, when I expressed my concerns regarding this, was kind enough to send a survey to ask operators what their actual usage was. So we would have ask them what their largest project looked like in their typical project. So we can see here that the largest project with the numbers we've seen would be concerning. We are talking that they have 70,000 volumes and 30,000 snapshots. That specific case is going to take a lot longer than the current system. So it's not great. Their typical project for that one, which is probably the biggest, would not be bad. The performance would not be bad because it would still be better in the create volume case. But here is why I wanted to add this topic to the PTG, because we have to decide what we do. Because we can see that there are deployments that will be getting negative performance impact based on this. They would not probably be happy if things start going slower for that specific project. So we have to decide what to do. One option is we just move forward with this dynamic counting, which has its benefit, regardless of speed. As long as you don't go out of sync, that is going to be a big improvement. And that is something that we can tell large projects. It's a trade-off. Accuracy for speed. You now have accuracy. You actually, the numbers you have there will be valid, and you will not clean your database manually or do weird things. But it may be slower for some of your projects. And for the other projects, the smaller one, they will be happy. It will be faster and it will be more reliable. So one thing we could do is just go ahead with this. Another alternative is to go to explore a mixed solution. The mixed solution could still count resources, but it could improve how we count it. Like in the new system, it could only use reservations for very few operations. I think it's 2 operations, extend, and another one, migration maybe, I think. And we would wrap everything in database transactions so that if something breaks in the middle of counting, you don't leave an entry for a volume, but it has not been counted, or the other way around. You have removed the volume row from the database, but you have not discounted it. So if we take those 2 halves of the approaches, we could do something that improves what we currently have. So the question why I'm asking is, this would require a change in the current spec that we currently have, would not be able to handle this specific mixed case. And we can, if we want to do it, which we can do it at a later time. We can do it now and postpone the other one to see if this one has the same problems as the old one with accounting. But we have to decide it because the interface with the Quota driver would be different. It would not, the one in the spec would not be able to accommodate this mixed solution. Before Christmas break, I did some testing, but when I clean up things for going on video, I lost my code that I did with this mix system. But here we can see how the mix system that I run test back then perform. It's the yellow one. As we can see, it behaves linearly because it can do just the retrieval of the counts directly from the database, and it's a lot faster than the current system. I don't know if I have yeah, the get usage, the same thing, half the time and linear. But this has problem that it has a higher chance of going out of sync if we make a mistake in the code than the dynamic counting. So that's why I would like to discuss, or at least hear people's opinions about which one, how we should proceed, basically. We can go ahead with what we have, the dynamic one, what's in the spec, just say this is what we have. We can say, okay, let's adapt the driver, the new Quota driver interface, so it can accommodate the mixed case, but not implement it. Just leave it as if large projects start complaining about performance, we can add an additional driver, or we can implement the mixed one and not the dynamic one, or implement both. So what are people's opinion after I've been talking for 30 minutes or whatever?
I had one query. So you were talking about get quota usages. So isn't that query always done before a reservation is made? Like when I'm allocating a resource in the quotas, don't we always do that query?
No, it's a slightly different. Get quota usages needs to count all the volumes per volume type for all the types, all the snapshots, all the backups. And I think it may also count groups. So you count a lot of them. Now, the queries I am working with try to limit what you count. So when you create a volume, it has a specific volume type. I don't care about the counts for the rest of the volume types. If I have just this one, I count this. I count volumes per volume type, and if the configuration option is set up, I also will count a snapshot and a snapshot for those types. Well, but for the rest of the types, I don't care about them. So it has fewer counts to do the database, and also we don't care about buckets. We don't care about groups. So you are reducing the number of things you query. And I even added some extra code to try to make it a little bit smarter and say, if your limits, your effective limits after getting the global in the per project says that you have no limits, don't do that counting. Because if there is no limit in gigabytes and only volumes, don't even bother counting it. There were some minimal optimizations that I tried to do, so that's why it's not exactly the same. Similar, but usage is harder on the database, new system.
Yeah. Okay, my comments on the whole thing. I don't understand the mix system a lot, but I was thinking about if we could make this configurable if they want to opt in into the old quota system or the new one, and we can mention the performance impact of their, like we always have a trade-off between the performance and the accuracy, and obviously the correctness is much more valuable to some people, and some prefer performance more than a configurable thing to opt into which one you would like would be my suggestion.
Okay, of the three systems, the counting and the mixed one, the old one is going away completely because it's, first of all, it's I could probably implement it as well, but I don't see much value because it's a bit crazy to commit, to roll back, to do. It's a lot more complexity than what Cinder needs. It was inherited from Nova, and Nova has a lot more resources to account for because it has to reserve resources outside of itself. It has to reserve in Cinder, in Neutron, in everywhere, and its own thing. But we don't. Ours is a lot simpler, so we don't need that reservations in general. So the old system would go away, and yes, we could implement both, but and that was one of the options. Implement both, get one by default, and say you can, if you have a large project, you can go with the other one. The thing is that as a team, then we would have two drivers that could have bugs. So we double the surface area of bugs. So maybe what we can do, which is a kind of mixed solution as well, is okay, we prepare the new Quota driver interface to support both, but we only implement the one we said we were going to implement, counting. That's the one we released first. And then we ask people, okay, if you have troubles, come back and let us know. If the new performance for your large project is inconvenient, let us know and we will implement the other one. But only if it's really, really necessary. And then we will say the caveats of the new one. You can try using this, but it may have bugs and you may have to fix the database manually. So we may want to focus first all our effort into designing one that, even if it's a little bit less performant in some cases, it at least doesn't have bugs and it does the counting right, which I think is most frustrating for people in general. Do other people think that seems like a reasonable one? Prepare for the case where we may need it, but not implement it yet? Crickets?
Yeah, I like this idea, and I personally prefer correctness over that. And based on the survey as well, I'm sure like the most of the people that have participated, only the first one was showing large numbers, and others were not as big of deployments containing massive resources. So this makes sense to me.
Okay, well, if nobody opposes it, I will go with that solution. I will update the spec to have an interface that can adapt to both. Mention it in the spec as well, the possibility of in the future implementing something different, and keep on working on the counting implementation, which apparently for most cases will be better. All right, well, that's everything I wanted to ask.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. Not sure about others' opinion. Maybe they will add their comments on the spec later, but I think we are in general agreement to the dynamic quota system, even though it causes some performance drop. Okay. Okay, I will just note down the action item for this.
There's probably no way to allow those people with large deployments to stick with the old system. Like if they do encounter the performance issue, they will view it as a regression, but there's going to be a lag until someone, you Gorka, can implement the new mixed mode. Until then, these people with a large deployment are kind of stuck. Just want to make sure that I'm correctly assessing the situation.
It would probably take me less time to implement the mixed mode than the old mode. So maybe I should, so if I have to convert the old system to the new interface, because I have to rip it off from all areas that it's right in the middle. It's probably more effort than just implementing the mixed mode. And I understand your concern. It's true that if I have a deployment, and for example, I have decided I no longer care about the quotas because they are completely broken, blah, blah. But I think maybe in those cases, if they just say, I don't want quota, it would work. But yeah, I see your point. The only solution would be to implement both. At least the new one would not have the performance impact.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this all falls into the whole TikTok concept. Can it be pitched as a two-step process? Step number one is the dynamic one that you're working on, and we sort of sell it as, hey, this is great for most people, but if you are a large deployment, then you might want to hold off upgrading to this version of Cinder until we get around to implementing the mixed mode that'll be coming later. I don't know.
Or
basically commit to the mixed mode,
Mm-hmm. Or we could, as a team, decide that we would allow backporting the mixed mode driver to a previous release if it doesn't get in together with that one. So, no, doesn't help too much, the backporting. Yeah, that, I don't know.
My fear is just that, a user with a large deployment, by the time they run into the problem, they're going to be stuck because they've already deployed the code and now they're hitting the problem, and we don't yet have a solution unless mixed mode is, coming quickly on the heels of it. And, now they're kind of like halfway across the desert and they can't go back, they can't go forward.
So I don't think it solves the problem, but it definitely needs an upgrade release note that the change could affect. We think that it could have performance problem for projects with more than N resources, and that they should.
Unless we build in some kind of safety valve thing, so,
Yeah, but the safety would be a different implementation.
Yeah, quite possible. So maybe that doesn't work. I was just trying to think of some way around it. So, hey, we think this will be performant enough for you, but if you're a special case and it isn't, I don't know, here's a circuit breaker you can flip. And
yeah, but the only flip I can think of is completely disabling quotas to be an op. You allow everything, yay! That's not good enough for anybody. And that's the only one I can think of that doesn't mean just implementing the other one. And my main concern in implementing the other one is not the difficulty, is maintaining the code. And that is my main concern. Because implementing it, it's okay. It's not a big deal. But then having two drivers, having to maintain two quota drivers, having customers using one or the other, that worries me a bit more.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds even worse.
That's why my proposal, I kind of like this idea of being able to support it in the future if necessary, but going with the one we have agreed, this one. And that is more likely to fix the bigger problem, which is accuracy. How do people feel about maintaining two quota drivers? they are not going to be too different, and they have one big benefit over what we have right now, is that they are going to be mostly in a single file, everything. So your driver is really in a file. It's not all over the place plus the database. So every query that we currently have for quotas in the database file is going away. There is not going to be there. If we have that code is going into the driver itself. So it's a bit easier to follow the logic and to read the code and to figure out what's going on, but still, it will be two drivers.
Sounds fine to me.
You're okay with two drivers? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Then I think we can go with Alan's suggestion of first implementing one with the comment of, hey, this may be slower. Then I finish the implementation of the second driver. And if it goes in the same release, we can remove the previous release note and it goes out as normal. And if it goes in the later one, they know that they may want to skip that release. Okay, I'll update the spec and spell this out so we can all confirm there. Okay, that's good. Thank you very much for the feedback.
Okay, I guess that was a good discussion, and I will just update with the action item. So, Volga, will you be proposing the spec for both at the same time, or you will be proposing different specs? Because the spec deadline is also like at M1 or M2.
Good thing. I think the proposal should be possible with both and define it as stages. Because for a reviewer, they will need to understand how the mixed mode works to see if the interface that is being proposed actually accommodates both, or if I'm missing something. So single spec.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I've noted down the action item, and I guess we can proceed with the next topic. If the NetApp team is around, I see Fernando, but it's not a topic by Fernando. Okay.
Hi. Yep. Okay. So what we would like to do is basically we bring a presentation for something we are in kind of a situation at NetApp. We have like a change in the way that we communicate with our clusters. So we used to have like a API system for it that we call ZAPIs, and now we are NetApp has exchanged it to a pure REST API system. So what we are doing in our driver is to basically do this transition, because ZAPI will not take forever. So it's going to eventually be deprecated. We know that it should occur at before December 2023, if I'm wrong, but the folks will present the documentation, and we are trying to make it happen before these deadlines, and customers would be able to continue using their driver, upgrade their ONTAP clusters, and continue to using like OpenStack OpenStack Cloud without no issues. So the folks who are going to present like what we bring today, But what we would like to discuss is basically how we could like deliver this kind of like a transition to customers for the ones that are still using old OpenStack releases. When I mean old OpenStack releases, I mean OpenStack releases that are still in use. We could consider like OSP 16, but like at least I think a minimal would be the releases that we that we still like provide more releases for it, like that we still like provide more patches and create more minors for them. So yeah, but the folks will basically bring the presentation. I'm just trying to summarize like what we are going to discuss. So yeah, go ahead. Who is going to start? Naim, Fabio?
Hello, everyone. Fabio is
Go
going
ahead.
to start, I
Yeah.
believe.
Okay.
Can we share our screen? We have a quick presentation with
Yeah, sure.
PowerPoint presentation.
I was just sharing the Etherpad. Now you can share, I guess.
Yes, thank you. Fabio, can you share your screen? I believe you're going to start. We also have an Etherpad. It's on the PTG Etherpad. There's a topic Etherpad. If you want to add notes or make some discussion, we had this presentation yesterday on the Manila session, and there's always there are a few points that we were discussing yesterday. If you want to add something during the presentation, and we can answer everything in the end. That's it, Fabio. Do you want to start?
I can share the screen. It shows that is
Share screen is disabled. Something like I am seeing a message. Share screen disabled for this meeting.
yeah. Now I can. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that option was enabled. Now you should be able to. Can you try now sharing the screen?
Yeah, I am just choosing the right one. Are you in PowerPoint right now? No?
Yep.
Yeah, your screen is visible now.
But is the presentation or is just the PowerPoint chat?
The PowerPoint PowerPoint screen.
Yeah.
I guess you can go to the slideshow option and it should be full screen then.
No, I guess that's right, is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
We want to.
You can start. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a presentation about how we are doing the REST migration for the ZAPI that we. Fabio, I started to the OpenStack is the end of Wallaby, in fact, but
Fabio, I having like trouble to hear you. I don't know if it's a problem here or.
are you listening me better now?
Yeah.
Your voice is breaking in between. Maybe if you can try changing the mic to the system one, it would be better. You can try that.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion.
Okay, now it's better.
Yeah, a bit better.
Yep.
Okay. The contest that we are going to about today is how we do a request to ONTAP today, why we are going to change, how we are going to make the REST transition, and the motive that we need backport for this, and how the patches are upstream right now. It's really simple. Right now we have our driver, our volume file that make calls to the ZAPI client, and it calls the ONTAP cluster. The ZAPI works with SOAP way of doing stuff, and often it returns XML for the driver or not. Sometimes it has results, sometimes it's just a simple call. Why we are going to change it? Right now it works fine. We don't have, it's been stable for a while. But since ONTAP 9.6, the ONTAP guys, they started to provide a REST API. And on the future versions of ONTAP, they will remove it, ZAPI. On the documentation, it's around 9.30 that it will be on the second half of 2023. By then, we will need to have the REST already implemented and on the right versions for OpenStack. Once it happens, customers, they won't be able to use ONTAP on the latest version if we don't have the REST supported. Let me see. That's the topic. So it will be removed and we need to port it.
Okay. As Fabio said, right now we are like in a transition phase. ONTAP supports both REST and ZAPI APIs now until 2023 when ZAPI will be deprecated. So we implemented the solution during this transition phase. The idea is to add a layer before ONTAP, before ZAPI. So basically, the solution we have now is something like the NetApp driver will call by default the REST client and try to make the request using the REST API. If for some reason it's not able to do that, it will fall back to ZAPI client. So during this transition, both REST and ZAPI will work fine. When I say that REST can fail, it's something like according to the ONTAP version, if a customer is using like ONTAP 9.8, some APIs in the REST side may have not been implemented. So it will use the ZAPI if REST is not implemented yet. And this is the main idea. I think you can move next, Fabio. Here is just a picture of our architecture, very simplified architecture. But basically what we have today when the master branch is this architecture. NetApp driver will call with what we call client C mode and client base, where all the ZAPI requests are handled. And these requests are passed to the NA server where the connection logic is implemented, and it will make the request for ONTAP. That's what we have today. After that, we are going to make the transition. That's what we are proposing. Yes. This is the architecture we are proposing for this transition phase. We added REST client C mode that will be before, let's say before the ZAPI client. So the app driver will always try to make the REST calls. If it's not available for some reason, it will call the ZAPI client and everything should be working fine because it was already implemented in the past and it was already tested. The same will be happening after the NA server in the connection logic. It will choose if the ZAPI client should be used or the REST client. We try to do this in a way that in the future we can remove everything that is related to ZAPI. So when ZAPI is deprecated, we would be able to remove all the green squares in the picture. And we also tried to make the minimum changes in the driver side. The idea was just to add a layer and to avoid to be less intrusive. That was the idea. You can move next, Fabian. Yes, so we have like a problem now because as Fernando and Fabio said, we are implementing this for both Cinder and Manila. In Cinder, we intend to merge this feature during the Z release, and Manila will be on the AA release. But what's the problem? Many customers are using old OpenStack releases, but they update the ONTAP backend. So it's a problem because if a customer is using like ROSP 16, ROSP 16 is based on ONTAP train release. We have many customers that are using ROSP 16, and the problem is that they update the ONTAP backend. So as I said, ONTAP 9.13 will deprecate ZAPI. So if the customer has like ROSP 16 and ONTAP 9.13 or 14, 7, and so on, it will stop working for these customers. And this is a problem we want to avoid. Another thing we have here is that ZAPI is no longer being updated, the ZAPI API. Since REST started being implemented, new bugs are not being fixed on the ZAPI in considering the ONTAP side. And the support will also be deprecated. So the customer would not have the support for ZAPI and he would need the support for REST. And the idea we have is to backport this feature for the old releases. We know that in general, the idea is not to backport features, only bug fixes, but we are trying to propose this to avoid this problem with the customers, and that's it. I don't know if I forget something, Fabio, you want?
Yeah.
Say
I
something?
think like it's just
Or
important
Fernando?
to mention that we are not going to include any kind of like, for example, if we have implemented revert to snapshot on Wallaby, we are not going to bring that features to older releases. So this is not what
Yeah.
we intend. Basically, we want to keep the exactly same features we had on each version, and because this it's basically this. The logic that implement the feature is on like the driver side, not on the client side. So what we would like to do is basically just have these changes to make the correct calls to REST And for that, we intend to provide like CI outputs for every release. We would like to to backport to. And yeah, so basically what we thought was to like work with backports because it would be the easiest way, and maybe like the even the folks that are responsible for maintaining the OSPI releases would be able to get directly from the official repos. But we could discuss alternatives. We are open to discuss here what would be the best approach. We would like your feedback and what you guys consider is the best approach for doing that. It's kind of like a question of keeping our driver moving forward with new features and with continuing delivering values to customers. So value to customers. So yeah, it's basically what we are trying to accomplish here. The REST transition is something that's going to be inevitable, and currently there is an effort on for every piece of software that currently uses apps to move forward to the REST APIs. And what is basically what we are going to accomplish here. Do we have more slides? Nine?
Yes, I think one more slide. Yes, we already have these two patches upstream. The first one is just the implementation for the REST client, the main architectures, as I explained in the pictures before. So, and the second one is a work in progress patch. We are migrating all the functions. You can take a look in both patches if you want. We grouped everything in the second patch. All the functions we migrated until now are grouped in the second patch. We are not sure if what would be better. We would like to hear your opinion also. If it would be better to have multiple patches separating by feature for each migration, or to keep this big patch because there are multiple lines of code and unit tests. We don't know. Maybe breaking the patch would be better, but it will be not so good for the backport. We need to discuss that also, but the patches are upstream if you want to take a look. And that's it. Right, Fabio?
Thank you, guys. So, I think small patches are better than a big one because I just open your patch and it's almost plus 2,000 lines of code, and it will be really hard for everybody to review such patches.
Yeah. I agree. It's something like we basically just to make it easier for demonstrating here, we brought just one patch with everything that we port until now. But this could best be separated in multiple patches. And the way that we designed this transition is that if the function is not implemented on the REST side, it's going to be forward to the ZAPI to ZAPIs. So we can, for example, create a patch that will only have a KOS client KOS functions implemented. Then we can move to stuff like consistency groups. So we can kind of group the functions we want to port by some kind of some kind of feature or something that it would be easier to comprehend and to review.
Yeah, on our downstream environment, everything is separated. We just group it all for this presentation, and it's nice to to mention that we have ways to run the Tempest tests on the patches. We have the local environment on our lab, and we can provide it, even if it's not running on the CI, as our CI only supports the master -2. But we have ways to provide it.
Yep.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
And they're somewhat related. What I heard was that during the interim, until the REST API is fully implemented in the ONTAP, that the driver will try a REST API call and fall back to the ZAPI one. Are there any performance implications for basically try it this way and it fails, now I'll try it the other way?
Yeah, basically, like what we are not trying to, for example, execute like a REST command getting like a fail and trying the other. Basically, what we are doing is comparing cluster versions. So we have kind of like a decorator, and there's two ways we use for identify if like that is implemented or not. First one is to look at the REST client and see if the function is actually implemented. And if it's not, we know that this function isn't supported by REST, so we can call the ZAPI client for doing that, because ZAPI client will contain like the whole set of functions, and REST initially will be a subset of them. And so this is the first part, and there might be the case where a customer is, for example, using ONTAP 9.7, but a feature was implemented in REST in 9.10. For that case, we have like a decorator that will always check for the system version that we have. We gather to basically is check if like we can actually execute that REST call in the version that cluster is running on. So if the cluster is running, go ahead.
Yeah, so the driver knows via the decorator whether to use the REST or the ZAPI call. It doesn't have to try one and fall back. Okay, that's good. So my follow-up question then is, you talked about the desire for older versions of OpenStack to interoperate with the newer version of the ONTAP that implements more of the RESTful API. Do you have the reverse problem? Are there situations where there may be customers using a version of OpenStack, but they don't want to upgrade their ONTAP, and therefore you need to preserve backward compatibility for the ONTAP version that only supports the ZAPI?
Yeah. I believe for that case, like a ZAPI could be like, we have like an initial plan to like deprecate ZAPI entirely at some point. But yeah, for sure, like we can have a situation where we would have like customers upgrading their ONTAP, their OpenStack environment, but keep like old clusters that could even be upgraded. For example, we could have situations where a cluster can't be upgraded past 9.4, for example. And for those cases, we could consider like keeping the ZAPIs, ZAPI calls for longer, and have like a configuration option where customers can decide if they would like to enforce ZAPIs even during the transition.
If you want to backport this to earlier releases, that's probably where the problem might arise. So if you consider, customers wishing to adopt the latest release, let's say it's Z, then it might be reasonable to consider they also need to make sure they're on a suitably updated ONTAP version. But if you're talking about backporting this to train, then customers that have deployed train back then are likely running an older version of ONTAP, and we can't impose on them, hey, we've backported this code into OpenStack, we're forcing you to upgrade your ONTAP. That would be a problem.
For sure, yeah. That would be for sure a problem. for that, like we can, like I think like the easiest decision would be to continue having like a for every backport, and would considering to have ZAPIs as default. We wouldn't remove ZAP support for any versions that would like be maybe we could deprecate for like a for newer releases in the future, and something that we can define like as a policy, or like we can bring for we can consider for like having a policy for that. But yeah, for the backports, I think like the easiest approach would be to have just like a to keep ZAPIs as the default, and and like enforce the execution of ZAPI calls. Uh, um,
Well, yeah, that's sort of
yeah,
it. I think because I've seen these situations elsewhere where you want to add support for the new and then deprecate the old. If you are hoping to backport this, then you definitely need a two-step process. So add support for the new RESTful. That's eligible to be backported, possibly. The community has to vote on that. But because you've preserved the original ZAPI interface, you won't break anything. Then, when you want to deprecate the ZAPI, that can only be forward, later versions of OpenStack, and you would not be able to backport that. That's my view. I don't know, what the other Cinder people are. I don't even get a vote because I'm not a core.
You're right. In general, it's not allowed to backport features, and I don't think that could be a case for this, because unfortunately it's up to vendor how to upgrade customers to newer releases of OpenStack and their hardware. And speaking about train, it's in extended maintenance phase, so I'm not sure that even all bug fixes could be backported to train on the critical ones or security bug fixes.
if I understood, like you think like a train would only accept like a security changes right now during its like a maintenance state, right?
It's extended maintenance state, and
Yeah.
for sure
Yeah.
it's not allowed to backport features to train.
Yeah, I think like what like the kind of like what we are looking for here is exactly this kind of like stuff. We had the same discussion with the Manila folks, and they basically said like a train is going to be a problem. We are not releasing train anymore. So like we could consider it for like the versions that we still release. So if I remember, Victoria is the last one. And I
It's
believe
not
that if
only about train, fortunately. In general, in OpenStack, we don't allow to backport features.
yes, like yeah, we are trying to kind of like this is like a we can see it like as a feature, but like as soon as we have like on tap 9.13 is going to become like a bug, because
No,
like
it doesn't
someone
work in
will
such a
it's
way.
go
I'm
sorry.
sorry, but it doesn't work in such a way. So, for example, in one particular release of OpenStack, we say that we support only Ubuntu 20.04 or CentOS 7, and that's all. And the same we should say for backends and drivers. So we should limit the driver in Train or driver in Victoria will work only with the following versions of backends. If we have somebody upgrade backend, he or she should upgrade OpenStack version as well. That's my point.
I myself, I'm a little bit divided because on one hand, I agree with Ivan in terms of this is a new feature. If NetApp wants it to be supported for, or that it, because of how OSP releases and how uh, long it takes for people to upgrade, they wanted to not break them until they upgrade. They should keep the ZAPI for longer on their arrays. That's on one hand. On the other hand, that's the theoretical me saying, this is how it should be. But then reality comes in and you guys have, well, usually people have zero control over what they are going to be doing on the array. And you know for a fact that they are going to break OpenStack. And there's going to be problems everywhere. And they are going to be fixing things in the array that if they don't upgrade, they don't get the fix on their storage. But if they upgrade, suddenly their cloud is dead. And for OpenStack, that is bad. As a project for Cinder, it's bad. If we are blocking the upgrade of the arrays, that it's not great. So on that side, I understand the need to backport this thing. Basically, it's, yeah, I need this because by 2023, nobody's going to be able to upgrade the arrays with fixes on important stuff because that's where the data actually is, and we need it. So for train, I would say no because but like you were saying, Fernando, for the releases that we still release, I probably wouldn't oppose to a backport of this, considering the implications that it has for a driver like yours. So
Yeah.
I think Train is stretching it a little bit much.
Yeah, the only reason we are talking about train here is because of OSP. So
With
like
the
a
60,
You
yeah, and
you can
it like if
pursue
you
downstream backports. That would be the avenue
yeah,
forward.
exactly. Yeah, that's what we discussed on on the Manila side yesterday, and this is going to be like something that we are going for. Try to get like a some like a downstream like a backport for that to see if it's even possible collaborative with like Red Hat. So we are going to seek for that separately. But yeah, so basically the goal here was to really understand the possibilities so we can we understand that just backporting to train would be like the easiest approach for like going to have it on ASP, but we have other ways to consider, or someone like we are going to do this query check like if it's even possible. But yeah, but basically what we see for most of our, well, not for most of our customers, but for some of them is that like they just move it from Queens to train to like they move it from OSP 13 to OSP 16, and they are not going to migrate in any time zone. So if it's working, don't touch it, and it's going to be the case considering that we have like OSP 16 with a support until 2054 at least. So we are going to have this problem for more than 1 year of ZAP is deprecated, and after that OSP 17 is based on Wallaby. So if they migrate to Wallaby and we can't backport, then we have another problem that Wallaby will be like 2027 or even greater. So
You're talking that you can't force your customers to upgrade OpenStack, and because you upgraded your firmware software with APIs, we need to break our rules and ignore our rules and use and allow to backport new features. So basically, it's allowed to backport a new driver. It's pretty same. And I'm not sure that
Yeah,
that's a good
like in
option.
terms of like yeah, like it's not going to be a new driver. It's just like we changed the communication with the like, but the logic is exactly the same. If you go through the code, you're going to see like that the way that we revert snapshots, the way that we create the operations are exactly the same. What changes is basically the calls that instead to be like a XML call is going to be something based on REST APIs. So like it's something that like it's from my opinion, it's something like it's like shady, it's gray. I wouldn't say that like we are exactly in like a broken rules because like a and it's more like we are trying to achieve here is that like maybe there will be cases where eventually these rules won't apply or like for a specific reason it's not going to be good for like a cloud deployers. So considering like existent clouds that have like many ONTAP clusters, we are going to have like and these clouds are we are going to see problems like everywhere. And what we want here is to to discuss alternatives, what we can do in order to make it happen. Like we try to find a solution in the code that would achieve that goal, and it's what we brought here. And what we want from you guys and your expertise is basically like what would be the best approach here, and we want to continue I don't think option for us like options having it in a separate repo is not an option. It's something that we don't want to maintain. It would be much more difficult or even impossible, for example, to continue with our OSP certifications, and something that yeah, basically the worry here is that we don't want to kill our driver or to make it we want to move forward, to continue working and continue creating features in the future. And we believe that but we have this problem that clouds are not like small softwares that we can just update a few pieces and or deliver a single a piece of software and it's going to be upgraded. So customers decide to keep the way it to keep software in old releases for long term. It's something that happens a lot, at least with in our side. Sometimes I need to work on people needs to rely on Okata and older releases. So yeah, it's a problem.
The way I see it is, and why I was prone to accept it to do a couple of backports, is because today this is a new feature. Let's say it is a feature because it supports a new protocol. So we would list it as a new feature. Mm-hmm. But in 1 year, this is not a feature. This is a bug fix. Because suddenly, if somebody runs Wallaby with a new hardware, it doesn't work. And you cannot make it work because the new hardware comes with the latest firmware. And then it's a bug in the driver. So in my mind, what today is a feature, tomorrow, literally, well, in 1 year, it's not that far away for how long clouds stay alive with the same OpenStack version. It is a bug. And suddenly you have a bug in Wallaby saying, this doesn't work with the new NetApp I just bought. That is a bug. For me, as an engineer, that's a bug. I would not say other way. So that's why in my mind, some bug ports are reasonable, given that in a year, this is going to be, for me, a bug. So it is, and I understand Ivan's perspective that this is a feature, because in terms, Now, today, when you have both things, ZAPI and REST API, REST API, it is a new feature to now support two protocols instead of just one. Yeah, but it's going to be in no time that's no longer a feature. It's a problem. That's why, for me, at least, it was acceptable. I don't know about other cores, so, but that was my perspective. Which I think it's what Fernando was saying, that this is kind of a gray area, given the circumstances. This feature that it's bug fixing, that's why I would see it also as a gray area.
Yeah, it's not really a feature from the perspective of somebody looking at Cinder from the API level. I can still create the same type of volumes. I've got the same type of snapshot support, the same, Cinder functionality. If you're just looking at it from the API perspective, then the fact that you've switched from ZAPI to RESTful is more of an implementation detail. This is just my opinion. Again, I'm mindful of what Ivan is saying, but that's sort of how I'm looking at it. The only other comment I want to make is there's a question of whether upstream backports are viable or downstream backports. If the community is willing to accept some upstream backports, okay, train is an extended maintenance. Let's say that one is off the table. My guidance would be to do as many upstream backports as possible, then switch to making downstream backport requests to Red Hat.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to doing them in parallel, please.
Yeah, yep.
I think I had this discussion with Brian, but so regarding this, I also agree that we can't consider a driver feature to be a Cinder feature. And we have, as far as I remember, reviewing the stable branch patches, we have allowed certain backports that look like a feature, but actually they are just supporting some compatibility in this. So this also sounds a similar thing to me. Regarding the upstream backport, I think it makes sense to not backport things until the extended maintenance. And Victoria is also going to be extended maintenance soon, if you see the mail from the release team. So the Wallaby, I think, is the last branch we can go towards. I had just one question regarding this support. So if I understand correctly, you said like the customers on train might upgrade to a version of ONTAP that is coming out in 2023. And if I remember the use case for Ceph, we only supported a certain number of Ceph releases to be compatible with a particular OpenStack release. So maybe someone more expert in this domain can comment on that, but I'm not sure how this support works because Train is a very old branch and the ONTP you're talking about is still in the future.
But I think the Ceph case is the opposite. You don't support something too old. New, you support everything. So Ceph doesn't have that problem, the driver. Because as long as you are from this version, anything newer, it's fine. Their case is the opposite. If it's too new, the backend, we don't work. That's a bigger problem.
Yeah. Like old OpenStack versions would still work with would have the necessary code. Yeah, I think I don't know like exactly the case for stuff, but what Gorka said makes sense.
But I think that's in any case the restriction that Ceph sets, which is only a lower version. It's what Ivan was also referring to. Just like we say, we only support this operating system, these Python versions, a driver should say, we only support these versions of our framework. And that is what Ivan was saying. If you release Wallaby, you should say, I only support up to this firmware version in my array.
Okay, that makes sense.
So what I don't know if we should make this an official voting on the with the IRC voting system, if we should vote here or how should we go about this, because the NetApp team needs to know, have an official position that we will not revert next week.
I think we have few people missing, like Brian and Jay, who are also part of the stable core team, and they surely might have opinions on it. So I don't feel very great doing this voting with the limited number of people we have from the stable core team.
Yeah, I wouldn't oppose to have like this. We could continue the discussion during our next Cinder meeting, maybe. It's okay for us if we don't have the necessary car or the necessary people to have a decision now. We will need to continue working on this transition anyway, because even if we can backport, it's going to be aimed for that. So it's just like it's okay for us. We can wait for this response, and eventually will be the time where like we will need to know, like, but yeah, we can wait like for maybe a few weeks to.
Okay, I guess we can discuss this in the next Cinder meeting, and also you would require some time to get the upstream patch merged. Then only you can start the backport process if everyone agrees on it. So I will try to get this discussion done, like we can do the voting in the next Cinder meeting, because I think most of the people are available there from the core team.
Okay, totally agree.
Great.
Yep. So thank you, folks, for your feedback. Like very important. Like it's been tough for like this is a difficult decision. Something that like is the kind of work that we kind of like we don't. It's more difficult to bring because it's not something that we are used to. Like but yeah, it's a difficult discussion that we brought for you today. But thank you for your feedback and
Thank you very much. We appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, it was a nice presentation. You made all the points clear. So thanks for bringing up this topic, and we will continue this in the next meeting and maybe later as well.
Yeah, and feel free to reach me if you would like to take a look at the code and like have any questions. Just send me a message on IRC and we can talk.
Okay, I guess with this we can move on to the next topic. If Josephine is around.
I'm around.
Hey, hi, yeah. Whenever you feel like you can start with the topic.
Okay, so to the ones of you who doesn't know me, I'm the one trying to bring image encryption to OpenStack, which is targeting more than one project. That makes it a little bit difficult. So there is also some work done by Barbican, which I have to rely on, named the secret consumers, and that's actually something where things happened last cycle, and so starting with that. Yesterday with the Barbican team, we talked about the secret consumers, as they now have micro versions, so they can actually activate the secret consumers for Barbican, and they would also, or they also want to implement the clients the client side of the secret consumers for Castellan and Python Barbican client, I guess, and they aim to have it ready for milestone 1 in that cycle. So if you're interested in secret consumers, it would also be nice of you to help with the reviews for the client-side patches, which will be coming. Not yet, but maybe in a few weeks. And yeah, so after that, I can start to work further on the image encryption. And the reason because it was halted for the last cycle was there wasn't an agreement how to proceed while we were still waiting on the secret consumers. But as they're hopefully ready soon, so at least there are no big bloggers ahead, I will be able to start working on that hopefully after milestone 1. That's it for the update.
So if I understand correctly, we are still waiting for the Barbican to implement their part of things, and then only we can proceed with this feature.
Yes.
Okay.
But I also had in mind that you were also interested in the secret consumers for the volume encryption. Am I right?
I have to be honest here. I don't really know what they are.
Yeah, so the question was if we were interested in secret consumer API for encryption.
The secret consumers is just basically a list of resources that consume a secret, so you cannot delete a secret accidentally while it still has consumers on it. It's just to prohibit accidental deletion.
Yeah, so we wanted to use this in cases like where we clone an encryption key when uploading the volume to Glance, then we can record that there's a Glance image using the key. And then when Glance wants to delete it, they can make sure they're the only one using the key, that kind of thing. It's not a strict requirement for Cinder, but it would be a good way to harden kind of our key management stuff. So I think we are interested in doing that.
Thank you, Wolf, for the explanation for me.
Okay, so I'm not sure about the conclusion here. So I understand that there is still effort that needs to be done. So Josephine, are you planning to repropose the spec for Z?
Yeah.
Okay.
If one of you is interested in using the secret consumers, it would also be maybe helpful to later review the client patches in Barbican. But I can, ping you on IRC when they're ready.
Sure, I guess this has been going for a lot of cycles, so some people might be aware of the whole context and some might not be. So we can discuss this further during the cycle, maybe in a mid-cycle, about the progress on this. But I guess for now, I will just note down the action item.
One thing I remember from Barbican is it's also very picky about who has access to a secret. So it's interesting that there can be multiple consumers. That's great. All the consumers, as far as I'm aware, will need to be the exact same user and project.
Well, they support using ACLs to grant access to other projects of users. So
true, but it requires like a whole separate, the owner needs to add the ACL to let somebody else access the secret.
Right.
It was sort of awkward to use. Anyway, I mean, this may be a completely unrelated aspect of Barbican, but it came to mind when I considered, the notion of having multiple consumers. Sorry, I'm rambling. It came up in Cinder because from Cinder's perspective, we have the notion of if you're in the project, then you're considered an owner of a volume. Yes, but if it's an encrypted volume, then Cinder may let you own the volume, but Barbican will not let you own the secret if somebody else in your project created it. They have just stricter access rights.
So I'm also not super familiar with this. I'm just noting down the discussion points. Maybe they're accurate or not. People can correct them on the Etherpad. Okay, if that's all for this topic. We have a cross project with Manila in about 25 minutes, and we have a increasing agenda on Friday because people are proposing topics the last time. So maybe we can take a topic from Friday and discuss it now, because I'm sure we won't be able to discuss all the topics. So, Kirka, would you like to discuss this topic of restoring Cinder backups? They become thick, not exactly, but yeah, when we are restoring.
Yeah, okay. This one we got asked to bring it to the community because we're looking for possibilities. So we're not coming with this is what we want to do, or basically we're coming with the problem so we can hear ideas. The thing is that when you migrate volumes, for example, if you migrate from a thin volume to a thin volume, because we use ZAPI, it does the right thing.
So, Kirka, your voice
is able to recognize the gaps.
I guess your voice is breaking if it's not just for me.
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah. Now better?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I clicked a link somewhere and it opened Chrome and suddenly everything went bad. Sorry about that. Okay. So let me restart. We were asked to bring this topic to the meeting. It's not something that we have a solution. We are looking for ideas, possible solutions, and things like that. What happens here is when, for example, when we do a migration from thin to thin, it works, as far as I know, fine, because DD is smart enough to detect the gaps and not write the zeros that are in the source into a destination. So your end result is also a thin volume. What happens with backups is when we create a backup, we have a file descriptor, we start reading, and zeros are zeros, whatever. They will get compressed and they will not take much space in our backup storage. But when we restore it, we write all zeros because, or whatever it's written in the gaps, because we don't know that they are gaps. So while if you look at the backend, you see that the restored volume, it is a thin volume. Since we have written everything, it is effectively a thin volume that behaves like a thick volume because everything is filled. So that is a problem with restoring volumes. Even when you restore to the same source volume, so I have a thin volume, I back it up, I restore to the same, and suddenly in the backend, it takes a lot more space. So what we're looking for is possible solutions for this problem. For example, if I remember correctly, I think SCSI has commands get the maps of allocated blocks. So one possibility would be if it's a SCSI volume, check the mapping and see what's allocated, only read those, store those as independent blocks in the backup, and then on restore, just restore those. But that is something that I think exists. I have never used it, and I don't know how it usually goes. And that doesn't work for NVMe disks. It only works for SCSI. So for NVMe, we would have to check how they do it, the commands. So I don't know if somebody with more experience in the Linux block device knows if there is an abstraction or if there is a Python library that can give us this information. How does DD do it?
Well, I don't really know why you would want to do it at that layer. That seems like the hard way to accomplish this. I mean, I think really what you want to do is when you're doing a restore, just scan for blocks that are all zeros in the restore and then seek and don't write them. And we have code that does this in one or two paths with DD. And I know that there's a few places that this is missing because I was trying to patch one up like 2 or 3 years ago, and I honestly don't remember where it was in Cinder. But if you're restoring a backup, I think what you really want to do is just look at each block that you're going to restore and then don't write it if it's all zeros and do a seek, which helps in some cases.
I have a question on that regard. Yeah, it only helps in some cases, not in all, but even in those cases, do we have an assurance that all vendors that support thin volumes will return zeros when you read to unallocated places? They could return.
They have to, or their storage doesn't work correctly. I mean, that's the default expectation of block storage. Because otherwise they would be leaking random data that's owned by some other person into the volume.
What I mean is that they could return FF instead of 00, and it's as valid as 00.
I'm pretty sure that that's not valid behavior because it's supposed to even write the same as if it had I don't know. I think that's not valid.
I think that's a SCSI standard, is that if it's an unmapped block, then reads will return 0, not FF.
Yeah,
I
but
think
that's
the standard pretty much anywhere that we care.
but we care more about than SCSI, right?
I think if any storage is not returning 0 on unwritten blocks, it's going to be broken for everything else too. So I don't really buy that that's a thing that anybody does.
How would it be broken? Because
everybody on the planet thinks that block storage should return zeros in this situation.
But you never do. I do a read, and if it's a 0, I assume that it's unallocated because zeros are data as well. So you never go that way. You go the other way. You first know that it's empty, and that's fine. But you don't do because it's 0 is empty. As far as I know, ever.
But that direction works here because if you're restoring a backup and you don't write the data, it should be filled with zeros.
Yes. But what I meant is that you said that if they don't return 0, they are broken for everybody else. And I say, no, not for everybody else, because nobody's doing it in that direction, as far as I know, in that direction. They don't say because there are zeros.
I would be amazed if you can find block storage that OpenStack is going to touch that doesn't behave this way. If that exists, I don't know why or where it would exist, because that seems very strange.
I'm old enough to have seen very weird things everywhere. But I will, so your suggestion is don't go crazy, just see if you have zeros and skip them on writes. And at the very least, that should be a great improvement, right? On the thing to think.
So that's one. I mean, that's an easy way to do it on restores. We have code somewhere in Cinder that does this because I feel like I wrote some at one point, but I don't remember where that looks for zeroed blocks. There are other ways to achieve this that are useful depending on the drivers being used. I was researching a while ago. NFS has the ability to do hole punching if you're using new enough versions of NFS. So you can restore volume and then tell the backend to just sparsify it where it can. RBD also has a feature for that now where you could restore an image and then call RBD sparsify, and it would restore its thinness afterwards. I don't know if there are situations where that's really useful, especially for backup restore, but it's an option in a situation.
Sounds good. So that could be a Cinder volume action, right? When you tell it to finish the backup because you have restore, there could be a Cinder volume action method where you say sparsify this volume if possible.
Yeah, and it's not just backup restore. I mean, you could also, in some situations, you might care about this on creating a volume from an image, depending on what kind of images you have and what they're stored on and that kind of thing. It's also worth thinking through that if you start using encrypted volumes, basically none of this works. So you want to pay attention to that where we're doing it. In general, I think it's very worthwhile to go through anywhere we can in Cinder and find places that we can maintain sparseness, because people do really care about this. I mean, we've had customer bugs from many years ago where people do migrations and various things and are annoyed that they've lost a bunch of space for no good reason. So, I mean, the policy in general should be that Cinder should try its best to maintain sparseness where we can, because that's pretty much what every deployer is going to expect us to do.
You said that for encrypted volumes, this would not make a difference.
Well, you have to think through. So the sparsify on the back end won't work because it depends on what you're doing.
Just
the
as
point is that you need to think through it, because if you write zeros, you can't sparsify it later because they're not zeros. So for encrypted volumes, it's even more important to never write the data if you want to maintain sparseness, because you don't have a way later to go remove the zero chunks, at least not from the back end side.
Yeah, but when we back up an encrypted volume, were we decrypting it?
I really don't want to get stuck on this point for too long. All I'm saying is that if you're trying to determine how to sparsify a volume and it's encrypted, you might not have a way to do it later. That might not be relevant to anything that we're discussing. If you do it in the situation where you can do it, it's fine. So the point is just on a regular volume, you can write whatever to it and then find the points later where you want to restore sparseness. If it's encrypted, you can't do that. Whether or not that matters for anything we're talking about, I'm not sure, because it depends on what operations you're talking about doing and where.
Okay, so that was a good discussion. I'm not sure if we had any conclusion for it. Like Eric's idea does make sense, but if we can find out the current code, as Eric mentioned, if we already have that in Cinder, it would be much more helpful to address this issue as well.
Well, I think what we really want to do is pick, one or two test cases where this presents as an issue and go look at how to fix them. So, I mean, I was going all over the place with Cinder in general here, but restoring backups, basically we need to pick whatever driver we're interested in for that and go look at the options for it, because there's probably a way to do something with it.
Okay, so if anybody is interested in taking that topic, like we just brought it up, we don't intend to work on it as of now. So if anyone is interested in working on this, so they can take that as a feature for that.
Was there a recent specific case or complaint about this? As far as a particular driver?
No, but specifically a particular PM told us to bring this up.
I think the response might then be, nice idea, it's complicated. Based on this discussion.
So someone is asking about the deadline. So there is no deadline, but if you take the feature for Z, then you need to propose a spec before milestone 1, and then you have to follow the release, the milestones for the spec freeze, the feature freeze, and everything.
Well, if this is inside of one backup driver, it could very well not really need a spec, but I'm not sure what the current goal is.
Well, the low-hanging fruit approach sounds appealing. I mean, if there are corner cases where this is going to not work or be difficult, then maybe we can isolate them. Or coming at from another perspective, if there are areas where we know it could work and would work it effectively, then maybe we do a partial implementation.
I mean, I think we've already done it in the places where it's really easy. So I'm not sure what the next ones are.
But the easy one is not implemented as far as I know in the backup driver. So that's the one that Alan is referring. Implementing the trivial one into a backup.
Yeah, so I mean, if we want to do it in the chunked backup driver, I don't think you really need a spec to go write 20 lines of code to just get 0 blocks in there, personally.
I was kind of curious about this because it seems like, so many services have duplicate detection in them. They just do like MD5 sums of data, and then in however big blocks, like 15 megabytes at a time, and compare them. If there was no change, then they declare them the same and link. Maybe something like that. So it's not necessarily zeros. I don't know. It might make sense in this case. I'd like to take a look, but I cannot promise anything because I'm a novice to all this.
Sounds good to me. You taking a look.
Okay, I guess that's good that we have a taker. And with that, we can go on a break. We have to join the Manila team for a cross project. They are going to discuss about CFADM. So people who are interested, they can go there. I have mentioned the Zoom link. I will just, if someone joins in during the break, I will just make the font a little bigger so people know they have to join the Manila room at this time. So we will meet at 15:20 UTC. That is in 15 minutes in the Manila room then. Let's stop the recording.